Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which has seen Spider-Man No Way Home break some pretty incredible records. It is now Sony's best ever opening weekend for a movie and is now the third largest debut of all time worldwide, and it actually just edged out a film called The Force Awakens in that category as well, which is pretty darn impressive. But before going any further into just how much money this film has made so far and how little money films like West Side Story and also the battle between Sony and Disney, how that's playing out for this year, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on, that way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see, Spider-Man, $587 million global opening. Seriously, one of the largest openings of all time. And what's amazing is that you will still have people trying to make excuses. They're saying, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, so this really doesn't, it's really not fair to compare this to other films. And yet, what have we been hearing about those other films? What else have we been hearing about these multi-million dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars films, and why and when they have done terrible is, well, it's the pandemic, well, Omicron. We've been hearing these excuses nonstop when movies have failed, and when movies have been able to actually push past, when movies have been able to be successful, because there have been some box office successes this year, you all of a sudden hear this random change of tune of them trying to, again, use anything and everything to explain away their original logic. It's very clear. Like, the only real argument that is any sense of consistency is, you know what has been doing well? You know what films have been able to make their money back? It's movies that have gotten not just good fan reaction, but have been giving fans what they want. People might try to say, well, yeah, if you look at the cinema score and the Rotten Tomatoes score for the other MCU films this year, they were all positive. Yes, but remember that the MCU has lost a crap ton of people who have just given up on it completely. So that number isn't even really a fair metric, because it doesn't even take into account the millions of people at this point who have just left the MCU, or who have just not seen an MCU film in the better part of 2 years because of the fear-mongering and because of the pandering and because of the nonstop pandemic rhetoric that we have been hearing, not just from the mainstream media, but also from the box office media as well. And now, since they've got nowhere to run, now that they've got no excuses left, they just come up with the most ridiculous of all excuses that at this point, if you haven't caught on, if you haven't quite understood the game that's being played here by the media, I don't know what else will wake you up at this point. If you've not been woken up yet by this, I don't really know what else will, and I pray for you to someday hopefully see the light. But going into this story, it says right here, Sony, top billing there, / Marvel Spider-Man No Way Home has become the third biggest global opener of all time, crossing the $500 million mark, makes it only the sixth film ever to milestone in a launch frame. So the sixth film to ever be able to cross $500 million on its launch. It's also, as it says there, the number 6 film of 2021 worldwide. And again, that's in total, meaning when you look at all the films released in 2021, it is now the number 6th film worldwide. Number 3 for the studios, meaning here locally, overtaking all of the other Marvel pictures by easy measure. Topping $500 million at open is even more impressive, as No Way Home did it without China, which is only the second film ever to do this 5th-century sans the giant market. And I think that's a huge deal, and I really hope and pray that Sony says to themselves, you know what, we don't need to work with those ridiculous communists over there. We don't need to split revenues with them and make sure and ensure that they get hundreds of millions of dollars of money that they're just going to use to continue to torture their own people and to continue their concentration camps, etc. So hopefully that's the wake-up call for Sony. It says at the international box office, No Way Home grossed $334 million from 60 markets across 5 days, landing number 7 for the year so far among all titles. So again, in just 5 days, landing at that mark, and it's still got a long way to go. As you can see, it right now is ahead of Far From Home in these markets in like-for-like and exchange rates being taken into account. It's ahead of Spider-Man Far From Home in these markets by 72%, Homecoming by 113%, Venom 2 by 183%, No Time to Die by 113%, and Fast 9 by 210. Those last two films are incredibly important because those last two films were the biggest grossing films of this year, right? Crossing a good $700 million or so. And most of the money for those films came from the foreign market. So if this film in those overseas markets is already ahead of them by 100 to 200%, we're looking at a movie that is going to easily be able to pass $1 billion, and all of that without China. So as I've been saying now for several videos, the pandemic narrative is falling apart, and it truly is a wonderful thing to see, and also to see how many people are getting triggered by this fact, by this financial fact in the comment section has also been pretty great as well. So going into the actual domestic numbers for this weekend, Spider-Man No Way Home, a Sony picture, as you can see, because it was distributed only by Sony, produced by Sony and Marvel, with Sony putting up 75%, and we'll talk about what that means for them and their bottom line in a second. But Spider-Man No Way Home, $253 million in its opening. Nowhere close behind is Encanto with 6.5, which after 4 weeks is only at $81 million. West Side Story saw a 68% drop in its second weekend, and that means that this film is going to be yet another massive financial flop. And Spielberg, again, you can try and blame the pandemic all you want, and yet you still have that $253 million film up there with Spider-Man No Way Home. Ghostbusters Afterlife continuing to make a little bit of money with a stronger hold over there, $3.4 million from Sony. Again, Sony is definitely by far, especially with Spider-Man No Way Home, it's going to be the most successful studio of this year. Nightmare Alley, which just came out as a limited release, got $2.9 million. Probably won't follow that film too much just because it is an independent and limited release, and so it's a little bit harder to really kind of gauge those films. House of Gucci came in with 1.8, and Eternals came in with 1.1. That film, as you can see, losing 1,100 screens, now at 1,900 screens, probably going to be well out the door at this point, not going to make that much more money. Remember that it needed to make $500 million to break even, and it's just almost crossing 4, so that film is donezo. So look at the worldwide total. Spider-Man No Way Home, $587.2 million. Again, this is not impressive just because it's just impressive for pandemic times. This is impressive for, again, movies in general. The fact that this film has been in the same discussion as other movies, like, for instance, that release of Endgame, is incredible. The fact that this film still theoretically, because they're saying it could even be more than this, when we get the adjusted numbers coming in by Monday through Wednesday, you could see this film easily cross the $600 million mark. This film will probably be able to cross the $750 million mark by the end of next weekend, adding in all of its totals, meaning that this film will probably be able to break $1 billion before the end of this calendar year, which is kind of an insane thing, that is an insane possibility. And this is even in the midst of countries going back on draconian lockdowns, violating the human rights of individuals, basing it all off crap logic. It's insane. And yet this movie is showing that people are willing to go through all of the nonsense, willing to put up with the nonsense, willing to go out of their way and put their lives at risk to go see a film that actually looks like it's going to give the fans what they want. And guess what? It is giving the fans what they want in droves. And where's my proof of that? Oh, wait, that's right. Record-breaking film right here. Not just because of the pandemic, but again, third highest opening of all time. Encanto, only at $175 million. Again, still a financial flop. House of Gucci, still a financial flop. Eternals, still a financial flop. West Side Story, a major financial flop that's not going to get anywhere else. Ghostbusters, still a flop at this point, but it is definitely inching ever closer to its break-even number. So as I said, this film could, in the next few weeks, be able to get that point, but obviously with everything being focused on Spider-Man and all the people going to see Spider-Man, they're not really going to see anything else. And so Afterlife might just have to wait and rely on 4K and Blu-ray sales in order to make up about the 8 million or so it still needs to make up. One interesting thing about the Spider-Man story is what that means of the battle between Spider-Man, or rather more so Sony and Disney. So I've actually made a fun little chart here, which I find quite entertaining. And so if you look to this chart, what you can see is as follows. First off, with the worldwide box office of $587.2 million, Spider-Man No Way Home already has reached its break-even point and begun to make profit. So it's made $52.3 million in net profit. Now, let's remind ourselves that there is a 75-25% split between Sony and Disney. So by the end of everything, whatever this number is, it'll be a 75-25% split. So let's go ahead and kind of do some future math here. What, at this point, if this was the end result, would that breakdown be? Well, it would actually be $39.2 million for Sony for this movie already, 13.1, I guess you can round up, for Disney. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how big of a difference that 75-25% split is. And even if you take into account that, it means that they are still, for the MCU alone, in the red. Remember that they lost around $98 million. They made $1.2 billion, but because of them spending $550 million, and they're only getting 60% of the box office, it means that $98 million is the loss for the entirety of the MCU this year. So yeah, you might be able to get to the point where this film reaches $1 billion, but keep this in mind. The worldwide box office is $587 million. So if this reaches $1 billion, which it's likely to do, that means that this movie is looking at what, $26 million? If it does even better than that, you're looking at what, maybe $50 million it's going to get from this take? That's nowhere near the amount of money that it's going to need in order for it to make up for this loss. And remember, this is just the MCU loss. This is not the other Disney films that have had massive financial failures this year. You then add on top of that how Sony has also put out Venom 2, which is also one of the more successful films to come out this year. So as of right now, Sony's total as far as net gain goes is at $186.1 million, which is absolutely crazy, which is absolutely incredible. And I will go ahead and add on a caveated version of Sony's take, putting in the actual 75% breakdown. So this is, again, just taking everything into account, but it is still worth noting nonetheless. One of the things that I have said from the very beginning that I'm excited about with this movie specifically is what this means for theaters. Disney, for the MCU this year, when you break down how much money the studios tend to get, the studios and studios and theaters tend to get right now, because the theaters aren't really spending much money as far as, making the film or marketing the film. Obviously, this is not taking into account operating costs, but across all of the theaters across the world, or rather specifically in this case across the world, theaters have made across the world from Disney's MCU around $484 million when you take their cut and their take into account, right? So out of the $1.2 billion reported from the box office, the theaters get about $484 million of that. Just from this movie alone, and obviously with a little help from so of both right now, just from two movies, Spider-Man No Way Home and Venom 2, and obviously most of this is going to be coming from Spider-Man No Way Home, Sony is already giving theaters this year $434 million. And so when everything is said and done, the amount of money that Sony specifically and that Spider-Man No Way Home specifically will be helping earn for theaters is going to be an insane amount. And that is, I think, one of the many reasons why, if I was a theater chain, I would be saying, hey, Sony, let's make some deals. Let's talk about the future, and telling Disney to go take a hike. Because while Disney is losing on their big releases, Sony has been making money on almost every single thing that they have put out there. Looking at the full charting, as you can see, $52.3 million is the current net gain for this movie before you split those things up. We can now make some projections for West Side Story because of its abysmal launch. The film will make anywhere between negative $117 million at best and $126.7 million at worst. So either way, it's going to lose well over $100 million. And right now, it's sitting at $133 million of losses. So yeah. Great job, Steven Spielberg. Very clearly, you've lost your touch. And the people who are for some reason defending him and defending the movie, trying to say, it's not about the money, it's about the art. Yeah, you want to make your money back. Even if it's for the art, you still want to be able to break even. And this film is going to be a net loss of over $100 million because of marketing cost and because of how much money they actually get back in return for their movies. So this is doing an abysmal job right now. And it's, again, another financial loss for Spielberg. We also, of course, have House of Gucci, which is another financial loss for for a couple other of the studios. We got Encanto, still at a $74 million loss. So this film, definitely not the worst case scenario that was being projected, but still nowhere close to what it needs to break even. As I mentioned with Ghostbusters Afterlife, right now the loss is around $8.3 million. So it's very much still doable, as the film still has a few weeks left of it to be in release. However, with this film competing with Spider-Man and other films in the future as well, again, this might just get to the break-even point, but it's at that point right now where if you look to Blu-ray and 4K sales, probably will be able to make up for that. Same thing with Dune as well, right? People have been saying this about Dune, but hey, Dune's still also in the financial red territory there, and I'll go ahead and try and see if there's any update for this. It looks like I think Dune actually might already be out of theaters, which would explain why it is not showing up here, either that or they weren't reporting it. So at $392 million, it, again, really hasn't changed all that much. And so I'll go ahead and I'll just go ahead and update that live so that way people can see exactly how much. Obviously, some people might try and say, well, if you just put that number in, again, $11 million still in the red. So this film also could make that up in its Blu-ray and 4K release. But the big news of the day, Spider-Man No Way Home. It cost $200 million to make the movie. Marketing, $300 million, $500 million break-even point. It made that in its opening weekend. The last film to do that, and one of the few films to do that in its opening weekend, was Halloween Kills, which, remember, cost very little. Its break-even was $50 million. So the fact that this film made $500 million in one weekend and is well on pace to make $1 billion is amazing. And really, all of the credit should be going to not just, of course, the people going out to see the film, but also, of course, to the character Spider-Man, who is owned by Sony. Obviously, we could talk about Marvel's influence on this, but if you look and see what are people most excited about when it comes to this film, you can try and say, well, Kevin Feige is a producer. Yeah, guess what? So is Amy Pascal, and so is Columbia Pictures. They financed the vast majority of this film. Again, 75% of this film came from Sony. Only 25% came from Disney. So that's pretty much a non-starter there. But what is it that people are excited about when it comes to this movie? What is it that people are saying and talking about, staying after the theater to talk about? What is it that's going to bring people back? What is it that's creating all the hype around this film? It is the Sony content specifically. You think people are coming back because they're excited about Doctor Strange? You think they're coming back because they're excited about specific things that are MCU specific? No. You would have to be living in an alternate reality if that is absolutely what you think. So even though, again, on paper, Disney has some role to play in this, there's no question about that. To say that this success is coming directly from or because of mostly in any way whatsoever, other than the very small role financially that they actually played in the process from Disney, and to ignore completely what Sony has not just done with this movie, but what Sony has done with almost all of their releases this year, you're ignoring reality and you're living in a fantasy world. Again, $52.3 million current gain for this film. What do you think this film's going to make? Do you think this film is going to be close to 750 by next weekend? I think there's a good chance. There's a very good chance. If this film drops 50% worldwide next weekend, guess what? That pans out to be around $250 million or so. So you're looking at a film, good chance of making and breaking $750 million next weekend. Could even break that of one of the largest grossing films of this year, which is the $771 million made by No Time to Die. And this is a movie, as I said, it is going to likely reach the $1 billion point. It's got a good chance of reaching the $1 billion point before the year's even out. And reminding ourselves, it is also not going to be released in all countries, as certain countries are going into lockdown, as different lockdown measures are being implemented, not just across the world, but also the United States as well. Even in spite of all of that, people are going out. I'm hoping and praying this is the event. This is the event that wakes people up to say, screw this pandemic narrative, screw this pandemic nonsense. It's time just to go out and live our lives again. because that is something that we should be focusing on instead of buying into the fear mongering from the media and from the media shills who, again, and you can go back to all my videos, who have been shilling so hard and saying, oh, well, the pandemic's the reason why this is not doing well. And now they've got nothing else left but except to say, well, it's an event film. It's the biggest event of the year. What else were you expecting? No one was saying this film was going to do bad. Sure. Again, write whatever narrative you want. The facts are against you. The numbers are against you. And numbers don't lie. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Slap that fire button if you're watching on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members. Animation Commentator, Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson ×4, Mitch Dunaway, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody, Mondo Spieler, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Allen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, and Tina Bojan, and of course, the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And for my Subscribe Star members, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribestar. And to my 4 members over on Locals.com, Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, once again, Mike Jackson, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. Thank you for supporting me on Locals. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, check out the top link in the video description below. It's called Willow or w.lo, Willow link. It'll bring you to all of my social media platforms and also to all of the various other locations that you can support the channel. You can get access to things like giveaways, where I do giveaways of 4K films, 4K steelbooks, digital codes, all kinds of stuff every single month. Also, there's a level where you get access to all of that, plus an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where you also get to ask questions that we will answer on every episode of the podcast. And at the final level, you also have the ability, the Chosen of Valhalla level, you have the ability to have all of that, plus in your first month, get a free t-shirt of your choice, any color, sent anywhere in the world, and also you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream featured on the main channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.